subscribe to our channel, like this video, and drop your comments below. Your support drives these powerful stories. You saw wrong. The father who came back after 4 years. The cafe and the cold truth. She remembered the sound of the rain first. It tapped softly against the cafe windows, blurring the world outside into a watercolor of passing cars and glowing traffic lights. People spoke in low voices. Spoons clinked against porcelain mugs. The air warm and heavy with the scent of roasted coffee beans. Everything felt ordinary, except for the way Eleanor's hands trembled slightly as she set down her cup. Andrew Sterling sat across from her, his posture straight, shoulders squared, as if preparing for a negotiation rather than a conversation with the woman he claimed to love. His blonde hair was perfectly groomed, his blue eyes steady, calm, unreadable. He always seemed serene in moments when she felt she was falling apart. It used to make her feel safe. Now it made her feel she didn't know him at all. There was another woman sitting beside him. A beautiful woman, of course. Tall, sleek, effortlessly polished in a way that suggested she'd been taught how to look perfect long before she understood why perfection mattered. Her laugh was light, controlled, shallow, as if she didn't feel things too intensely and didn't need to. Eleanor, Ella had walked in expecting a conversation, a chance to mend what had started to crack between them. She didn't know exactly what had changed, but something had. She could feel it, like a shift in the air before a storm. She'd expected him to talk. She'd expected him to say he was tired, confused, overwhelmed. Anything. But what she saw instead was him sitting close to another woman in a way that didn't look like coincidence, accident, or misunderstanding. Her chest squeezed painfully. Her breath caught. She whispered, not trusting her voice to be louder. "Andrew." He looked at her then, truly looked at her. But instead of guilt, regret, or even surprise, there was only annoyance. As if she were interrupting something important. As if she were the intruder here. "You saw wrong," he said, his tone monotone. As if that were all the explanation required. As if the heaviness in her lungs, the sudden ache in her ribs, the certainty that something inside her was tearing, meant nothing compared to his certainty. Eleanor blinked. Rain streaked down the pane beside her, making the city look distant, unreachable, appalled. "I did?" she asked, her voice steady in a way that belied the panic gripping her inside. "Yes," he replied, already turning back slightly to the woman beside him, as if the discussion were over, as if her presence were irrelevant. Something inside Eleanor went silent. It didn't shatter. It didn't break. Silence. She looked at him. The man she had laughed with late into the night. The man who had once held her face as if it were precious. The man who told her he loved her. And she realized she had loved him in a way that left her unprotected. Too open. Too exposed. And now there was no shield left. "I understand," she whispered. She stood up. Her legs felt strangely light, as if they couldn't hold her. But they did. She turned and walked toward the door, the bell above it jingling softly as she opened it. The rain greeted her with a cold kiss on the skin, but she didn't flinch. She did not look back. He did not follow her. He did not call her name. He let her go. Outside, the city kept moving, oblivious to her heartbreak, her silence, her empty chest. She crossed the street slowly, breathing carefully, as if a too deep inhalation would make her whole body collapse. She told herself she wouldn't cry. Not here. Not now. A month later, she found out she was pregnant. Her hands shook around the test. She sat on the edge of her bed and stared at the 2 lines that changed everything. Her heart pounded, and the air felt thick, and the world suddenly tilted into something both terrifying and brilliant. Then the ultrasound showed 3 heartbeats, 3 lives, 3 pieces of her and him. She pressed her hand against her stomach, and for the first time since leaving the cafe, she allowed herself to cry. Not because she was broken, but because something new was beginning inside her. Something bigger than the pain. She did not call Andrew. There was nothing left to say. She whispered to the quiet room, "I will protect you, all of you, I promise." And she did not look back. 2. The impossible melody. 3 heartbeats in North Haven. The doctor's office smelled faintly of antiseptic and warm paper gowns, the kind of sterile quiet that usually made people uneasy. But Eleanor sat very still, one hand resting over the small rise of her stomach, as if trying to memorize every second. The screen in front of her glowed softly, and the rhythmic sound of 3 separate heartbeats filled the room like an impossible melody. The nurse smiled gently, unaware of the turmoil beneath Eleanor's serene expression. Most mothers cried tears of joy. Eleanor felt joy, yes, but it came mixed with a fear so deep it settled like a stone behind her ribs. "Triplets," the doctor had said. His voice had been warm, careful, as if he were offering her something fragile. "You'll need rest, support. You shouldn't do this alone." Eleanor nodded, though inside she wanted to laugh. She was already alone. She had been since the moment she walked out of that cafe. And now the world inside her was multiplying. 3 tiny hearts, 3 small futures. It was astonishing how life could expand, even when you felt like your world was collapsing. She moved out of the city within 2 weeks. She packed her belongings in silent motions, folding clothes she once wore for brunches, for business dinners with Andrew, for nights when his fingertips traced her jawline as if it were something sacred. Those clothes went to the bottom of a suitcase. Somewhere deep, somewhere unreachable. Instead, she took the little money she had, a few photos, and the sound of 3 heartbeats ringing in her mind. The new town was small, tucked away among quiet back roads and wide fields, a place where children rode bikes on the sidewalks and neighbors waved even if they didn't know your name. Her apartment was tiny, only 1 bedroom and a narrow kitchen, but sunlight spilled through the windows in soft morning patterns, and she found herself breathing easier for the first time in weeks in North Haven, Vermont. She started working remotely for a small bookkeeping firm. It wasn't glamorous, and the pay was modest, but it was stable. She took online parenting classes, joined local support groups for new mothers, read books so worn from page-turning they frayed at the edges. Some nights, when sleep refused to come, she sat on the living room floor, one hand resting on her stomach, whispering to the lives growing within her. "You are not mistakes," she would say softly in the silent apartment, where the refrigerator hummed and snow fell outside. "You are the best thing I have ever done." She meant it, even when she was scared, especially when she was scared. The months that followed were heavy. Her back ached constantly. Sleep was rare and shallow. She learned to breathe through the discomfort, to take slow steps, to sit down when her legs trembled. The nurses at her appointments often praised her strength. They didn't know she sometimes cried in the shower, the hot water masking the sound. They didn't know she sometimes missed Andrew with a ferocity that scared her, not because she wanted him back, but because some part of her remembered what it felt like to be held, to belong. But loneliness did not break her. Every time the babies kicked, every time she felt the flutter of movement beneath her hand, she remembered why she stayed, why she fought, why she kept going. As her due date approached, complications arose. Labor came early, too early. The hospital room was filled with quick footsteps and strained voices. Eleanor barely remembered the pain. She only remembered the fear that something would go wrong. Then, 3 cries. 3 tiny voices protesting the world. 3 fragile bodies placed one by one into her arms. They were tiny, impossibly tiny, each swaddled in identical white blankets, save for the colored wristbands with their names. Liam in blue, Elias in yellow, Caden in green. Their hair was pale, soft as down. Their eyes opened, clear, bright, unmistakably blue. His eyes. Eleanor held them, and everything inside her softened into something unbreakable. She belonged to them, and they belonged to her. She whispered to each one, their names like prayers. Liam, the quiet one, looked at her as if he had seen her before. Elias squirmed and kicked, feisty, determined to take up space. Caden snuggled against her heart and refused to let go. She did not think of Andrew then. Not his voice, not his absence, not the phrase that had once broken her open. She thought only of survival, of love, of the impossible, extraordinary task of raising 3 small lives. And as night fell over the quiet hospital room and the nurses moved softly in the dim light, Eleanor did not sleep. She sat awake, her body aching, her eyes heavy, but her heart full in a way that warmed her chest. She looked at her sons and whispered, "It's us now, and we are going to be okay." Reflection. Question. Eleanor found a strength she didn't know she had, but do you think the loneliness and lack of support might have been the cruelest form of punishment for her? Share your thoughts and subscribe so you don't miss the journey Andrew took. 3. The echo chamber. Andrew's true loss. Andrew didn't notice the shift at first. When Eleanor left, he went on as if nothing had happened. The success he once wore as a second skin had begun to feel heavy, like a suit too tight on his chest. Victories felt strangely hollow, like applause in an empty theater. He told himself Victoria, the woman in the cafe, was just a business partner. He had been frustrated, tired, irritated after a week of meetings. Eleanor arrived unexpectedly, saw, and her expression shut down like a door. He remembered trying to explain, but the explanation hadn't been enough. Or perhaps he hadn't truly tried. Maybe pride had spoken for him long before his heart realized what it was losing. At first, he assumed she'd call. She always had before. He'd believed too easily in his own importance. When she didn't call after a week, he felt anger, then confusion, then worry. After 3 months, the worry became fear. He called her phone. Disconnected. He called her family. They said she was fine, but refused to say where she had gone. He sent messages, long at first, then short, then nothing. He drove to her old apartment. Empty. He tried to track forwarding addresses, but her name was nowhere to be found. She was as if completely erased from the city. He hired investigators, secretly at first, then openly. They found traces of her shopping, a grocery receipt here, a pharmacy visit there, but no address, no city, no destination clear enough to follow. She had disappeared deliberately. The years that followed were plagued by frustration and a guilt that kept sharpening instead of fading. He dated other women, trying to move on, but every relationship felt thin, temporary, like trying to talk through glass. His family encouraged him to remarry, to find someone appropriate, someone ready for his lifestyle. He nodded, agreed, smiled, but inside, something refused. Every woman was measured against Eleanor. Every conversation fell short. Sometimes, late at night, he found himself wondering if she had been pregnant when she left. The thought arrived uninvited, unwanted, and yet once it arrived, it never left. He would look at his hands and wonder what he would do if he had chased away not just her, but a family. The possibility haunted him like a shadow. He began walking the city at night, on nights he couldn't stand to be alone in his penthouse. He passed playgrounds where children shrieked with joy and mothers called out their names. He stopped in front of toy stores and looked at the small clothes displayed in the windows. The sight of a tricycle once made him sit on a bench and stay there for nearly an hour, motionless. Something inside him had broken that day, something he couldn't repair with logic or reason. Then, on a winter morning, he heard her name again for the first time in 3 years. He was in a downtown cafe, one he'd only stopped at because he felt too restless to go back to work. 2 women were talking softly behind him. One mentioned Eleanor Hayes and 3 boys. The words hit him like a physical blow. He didn't turn around immediately. He couldn't. His chest felt too tight. He waited until their voices began to fade, and then he stood up, followed them, and softly asked, trying to keep his voice steady, where Eleanor lived now. It took him months more to find her. Every lead was fragile, vague, half-hearted. But he followed every single one. His reputation no longer mattered. His pride had burned away long ago, and on a snowy afternoon, after 4 years of searching, his car pulled up in front of a small daycare near a quiet park. He didn't know why he stopped. He didn't know what he expected. He just felt something primal, something undeniable, telling him to look. That's when he saw them, 3 boys, nearly identical, laughing wildly as they threw snow in the air. Their hair was pale blonde. Their eyes were bright, incredibly blue. His eyes, his face, his expression in miniature form. His body froze, his breath caught somewhere between disbelief and a recognition so profound it felt like a cut across his ribs. And then he saw her. Eleanor, standing nearby, bundled in a warm coat, a paper cup of coffee steaming in her hand. She looked older, not worn. No, she was too strong for that. But mature, grounded, real in a way that made every sleek, perfect woman he had been with since seem artificial. She looked up. Their eyes met. Time did not stop. It just narrowed, everything else dissolving into silence. He understood everything in that instant. The loss, the consequence, the weight of his words and his pride, the years she had lived without him, the children she had raised alone, and for the first time in his adult life, Andrew felt fear. Not pride, not anger. Fear of what she would say. Fear of what he had done. Fear of whether forgiveness was a possibility that still existed in any universe she inhabited. He had found her, but he didn't know if it was too late. 4. The exchange of truth. He did not approach her immediately. He stood there in the cold, his breath clouding in the air, unable to convince his legs to move. It was the first time in his entire life that he, a man who made decisions for entire corporations and commanded rooms with a single glance, felt unsure about even taking a step forward. He watched Eleanor kneel to fix one of the boys' scarves, the soft way her fingers moved, her patience, the quiet stability she carried with her. She had always been like this, calm where others rushed, soft where others sharpened. But now that softness was stronger, more complete, she was not the same woman he remembered. She was more. One of the boys, the one in the green hat, Elias, noticed him first. The boy stopped mid-stride, snow clinging to his mittens, his head tilted as if something in Andrew's face felt familiar, though he didn't know why. Then the others followed, turning their bright blue eyes toward him with open curiosity. Andrew felt the world tilt again. He wanted to speak, to say something, anything. but there were no words that could capture the weight of what was happening. Eleanor stood up. Her breath escaped visibly in the cold air. She did not move toward him, but she did not take a step back either. Her expression held no shock or panic, only a quiet, deep fatigue of someone who had already lived the hardest part of the story. "Andrew," she said simply, as if his name were just a name, and not a wound that had healed, broken, and re-healed. He swallowed, the cold biting his throat. Eleanor. The silence between them was not empty. It was full. Of the past. Of the lost years. Of all the questions neither of them dared to ask yet. The boys looked on with mild curiosity. Not fear, not confusion. Just the innocent openness of children who saw the world in possibilities, not consequences. Eleanor looked at her sons, then back at Andrew. "Come," she said quietly. "They're cold. We should talk somewhere warm." He followed her because there was nothing else he could do. The daycare workers greeted her warmly as they left, one of them smiling and reminding Eleanor about a painting project tomorrow. She smiled back, small, but real, and Andrew felt another stone settle in his stomach. This was her life now. Simple, grounded, built with effort and love. A life without him. They walked to a small cafe on the corner, the same kind of quiet, warm place she had always gravitated toward. The boys scrambled onto the booth, chattering excitedly about snow forts and cookies and whose hat was wetter. Eleanor ordered hot chocolate for them, and without thinking, Andrew ordered one for himself too, just as he used to, before everything changed. The familiarity of the moment unsettled him. For a long time they did not speak. They simply existed in the same space again. Finally, Eleanor turned to him. Her voice was quiet, but not cold. "How did you find us?" The truth was too heavy to dress up in anything less than honesty. "I've been looking for you for 4 years. She didn't react at first. She just blinked slowly, absorbing the words as if testing them for sincerity. 4 years is a long time to look. "It was longer without you," he replied, and it came out quiet, almost fragile. The kind of truth that wasn't meant to win anything, but to be understood. Eleanor looked at her hands. They were strong hands, hands that had held 3 newborns, cooked countless meals, carried groceries while pushing a stroller, wiped tears and noses, and worked late into the night. Hands that had built a life in the shadow of heartbreak. "You hurt me," she said, not accusing, not emotional, simply stating a fact. "Not just that day. I was alone, with all of this, and it was hard. Harder than I thought I could bear." He closed his eyes, and for the first time she saw his composure break. "I know, and I will regret it for the rest of my life." The boys giggled at something, oblivious to the conversation laced with silence and memory. They didn't know they were the center of the universe in that moment. They didn't know their existence was the hinge between the past and the future. Eleanor sighed softly. "They're good boys. They're kind. They laugh easily. They're loud, and the apartment is always too small, and I'm tired most days. But I love them more than anything I've ever loved." He looked at the boys again, 3 small miracles wearing his eyes. "May I meet them?" His voice was barely a breath. Eleanor studied him carefully. She was no longer the girl who had left her heart unprotected. She was a mother now. She was still coated in warmth. "Yes," she finally said, "but slowly, my way, and only if you stay steady. They don't need people who disappear." He nodded. "I won't disappear." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she turned to the boys, brushing snow from their coats. She did not say she forgave him. She did not promise a future. She did not fall back into what once was. But she did not shut the door. And for now, that was enough. Dramatic twist and consistency. Eleanor has taken a cautious first step. Do you think Andrew can keep his promise not to disappear, or will the pressure of his old life tempt him back to his old ways? Keep reading and subscribe to find out the difficult test that awaits them. V. The trial by fire. Consistency over words. He began by showing up. Not with gifts, not with grand gestures, not with apologies repeated until they meant nothing. Just present. The first time he went to the daycare to pick up the boys with Eleanor, he waited by the door while the children rushed into her arms first, as they always did. Then, slowly, they started running toward him too. Not all at once, not uniformly. Elias was the first, wild and fearless, charging straight for Andrew's legs as if he had known him all his life. Caden followed after a week, raising his arms in that quiet way of his that asked without needing words. Liam held back the longest. He stayed close to Eleanor, watching Andrew with serious eyes that seemed to gauge something deeper than a gesture or a tone. Andrew didn't rush him. He knelt down to his level every time and spoke softly, not reaching out first. When Liam finally approached, placing a small hand on Andrew's shoulder, it felt like the unlocking of something sacred. The town began to notice. A tall, blond man in sharp suits among quiet streets and simple homes. Some people whispered. Some recognized him from magazines or business articles. Others simply nodded politely. But no one interfered. Small towns had a way of allowing stories to unfold at their own pace. Every weekend, they went to the park. Andrew sat on the grass, tying small shoelaces, teaching the boys how to make snowballs or skip rocks or stack sticks into imaginary forts. He learned that Elias hated mittens. Caden refused to drink hot chocolate unless it was warm enough to wrap both hands around the cup. And Liam asked questions so thoughtful, they sometimes left Andrew speechless. He learned slowly and carefully to be something he had never envisioned being. Patient. Eleanor watched all of this, not from a distance, not like a stranger, but with a cautious heart. She didn't rush or cling to the history, but she didn't reject him either. She let the children set the pace and trusted them to recognize sincerity better than adults often could. One evening, the boys fell asleep early after a long day in the snow. The apartment was quiet, save for the hum of the heater and the soft rustling of blankets. Andrew was sitting at the kitchen table, his coat still draped over the back of the chair, his hands wrapped around a cup of untouched tea. Eleanor was rinsing dishes at the sink, her movements slow, unhurried. Almost meditative. "You're good with them," she said after a moment, her back still turned. He didn't answer right away. He didn't want to ruin the simplicity of the moment with something heavy or rehearsed. "They make it easy," he finally said. "They're extraordinary." Eleanor turned then, leaning against the counter, drying her hands on a towel. "Our sons," she corrected gently. "They are wonderful, yes, but they are also loud, exhausting, stubborn, messy. It is not always easy." He nodded. "I wasn't there when it was hardest. I know." The apartment felt smaller suddenly, filled with all the things they still hadn't said. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want to ask you for anything," she said, sitting across from him. "Not money, not help, not explanation. I wanted to prove I could do it myself. I had to survive, and surviving meant cutting off everything that made me weak." He looked up. "Loving me was the weakness?" She didn't flinch. "No, losing myself to you was." The honesty hit him harder than any accusation could have. He inhaled slowly, searching for something to say that wouldn't shatter the moment. "I can't undo what I did," he said quietly. "But I can do better now, if you let me." Eleanor studied him. Not his face, not his clothes, but his silence. His stillness. The way he didn't try to defend himself. The way he didn't try to reach for her hand. The way he didn't ask for forgiveness, only the chance to try again. In the way she allowed. "You are doing better," she said. "Right now. That is enough." They didn't talk about love. They didn't revisit the cafe. They didn't recount the pain. They simply sat, breathing the same warm air, as the stillness wrapped around them gently instead of painfully. Over the next few weeks, something changed. Not fast, not dramatic, but constant. The boys started asking when he would be back. He started spending nights helping with baths, drying small, wet curls with a soft towel, reading bedtime stories with different voices for each character. He learned how to soothe nightmares, how to hold a half-asleep child without waking him, how to fall asleep on the sofa with one or two small bodies snuggled against him. Eleanor found herself watching him, not because she needed to evaluate him anymore, but because something about him now brought her peace instead of pain. The walls she had built around herself weren't crumbling. They were opening. One night, after the boys were asleep and the house was quiet again, Andrew stood up to leave. He walked toward the door, his coat in his hand. Eleanor followed him to say goodbye. He paused before opening the door. "Thank you," he said. Just that. Sincere. "Heavy, so," Eleanor nodded. "Drive safe." He walked out, snow falling softly around him. But before he reached the stairs, she called out softly, almost too quiet to hear. "Andrew." He turned. "You can stay for dinner tomorrow," she said. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't forgiveness. It was something new. A beginning, not of what once was, but of what could be. Last interactive. Question: do you think Eleanor is ready for love again, or is the dinner simply for the boys' sake? Comment your thoughts and see how this new chance unfolds in the grand finale. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful true stories. The future built. Slowly and fully. Epilogue. The dinner invitation turned into routine faster than either of them expected. At first, it was just once a week, then twice. Then it became normal for Andrew to tap softly on the door every night around 6, snow dusted on his coat or the wind reddening his cheeks, and 3 boys to rush down the hall shouting his name. Eleanor cooked simple meals: stews, pasta, roasted vegetables, and Andrew learned to set the table properly with mismatched plates and forks, because nothing in this home was curated or decorative. Everything here was real, lived in, and warm in a way his penthouse had never been. One February evening, after dinner, the boys insisted they all build a blanket fort in the living room. They pulled cushions from the sofa, dragged chairs across the floor, and demanded Eleanor find the biggest blankets in the house. Andrew helped them drape the fabric from chair backs and sofa arms, his hands clumsy at first. But the boys corrected him with such authority and confidence that he found himself laughing, genuinely, freely, as he hadn't in years. Eleanor sat on the floor watching him, legs crossed, hands wrapped around a mug of tea. The soft lamplight cast warmth on his face, and his expression was thoughtful, almost tender. The boys finally tucked themselves into the blanket fort, giggling wildly, whispering secrets only 3 brothers can understand. Eleanor and Andrew sat in the dim living room in the leftover quiet, their laughter fading into a comfortable silence. "Do you miss your old life?" she asked suddenly, her voice low. The one before all of this. He looked at her, slowly, and shook his head. "I miss who I thought I was, but I don't miss who I actually was." She absorbed that. It wasn't the kind of phrase someone said to impress. It was something that came from a place with scars. He leaned back, resting an arm along the sofa. "I used to think everything had to be earned. Money, reputation, success, even affection. I thought love was a transaction." His jaw tightened, not in anger, but regret. I didn't know how to be gentle. I didn't know how to stay when things weren't perfect. Eleanor didn't look away, and now he exhaled through his nose, slow, heavy. Now I stay, even when I don't know what to say, even when I'm scared, even when I don't deserve to. The honesty in his voice made something inside her soften, not dramatically, not like a door slamming open, but like ice beginning to melt. The boys eventually fell asleep inside the fort, their breathing soft and even. Andrew carried them to bed, one by one, learning to shift his weight so as not to wake them, memorizing the feeling of small arms instinctively curling around his neck. Eleanor followed, tucking blankets around each child, brushing hair from sleepy foreheads. Their movements were synchronized, as if they had done this together all their lives. Later, in the kitchen, Eleanor poured him tea. He wrapped his hands around the warm mug, not drinking, just feeling the heat. The apartment was quiet, calm, filled with the faint scent of cinnamon and something like peace. Eleanor leaned against the counter, her gaze steady. "What are you afraid of?" she asked quietly. He didn't hesitate. "That you'll forgive me only enough to allow me to stay in their lives, but never enough to allow me back into yours." The words hit her, not because they were dramatic, but because they were true in a way that revealed how deeply he had been thinking, how long he had been waiting. She set down her cup, the sound soft but final in the silent kitchen. "I'm afraid of something too." He looked up. "I'm afraid that if I let you back in, it will hurt if you leave again. And I can't break like I did before. Neither can the boys." This was the truth that had lived in the space between them all along. He moved closer, not invading, not reaching, just closing the distance enough so his voice could remain soft. "I won't leave," he said. "Not because I want a second chance with you. Not because I regret what happened. Not because I feel guilty. I won't leave because I love them. Because they are mine. And because I want to be the kind of man who deserves to be theirs." Her breath hitched, not from fear, but from the recognition of something real. This was not the man she walked away from. This was someone rebuilt. Someone who had bled and learned. She looked at him for a long time, the silence stretching, warm and heavy. "You are changing," she whispered. "No," he corrected gently. "I have changed." The difference mattered. Eleanor did not step into his arms. He did not seek hers. Love did not need to rush, not now. But she did something small, something fragile and huge all at once. She touched his hand. Just once. Just enough. And he closed his eyes, not to savor it, but to respect it. It wasn't a declaration. It was a permission. A beginning. 7. The final anchor and the future. Spring arrived softly in the town, snow melting into glistening puddles along the sidewalks. The boys were 4, full of energy, curiosity, and the wild joy that came from discovering the world little by little. They chased each other in the apartment's backyard, their laughter echoing against the wooden fence, their golden hair gleaming in the afternoon sun. Eleanor watched them from the porch, a light cardigan over her shoulders, her eyes following every movement with a tenderness that had been carved into her over years of motherhood and resilience. Andrew sat beside her, elbows propped on his knees, watching the children with the kind of attention that no longer held distance. He had moved to the town 3 months ago, not into her home, but into a nearby apartment. Close enough for the boys to run between their homes in less than a minute. He didn't ask to move in. He didn't rush anything. He didn't try to fit into spaces that weren't ready for him yet. He simply made himself present, consistent, reliable. It was slow, steady, ordinary. And it was that ordinariness that made it sacred. Eleanor had begun to allow herself to relax in his presence. There were evenings they cooked together, when his hand brushed hers and neither pulled away too quickly. There were mornings he brought her coffee to the door, while the boys still slept, and they shared a quiet conversation on the porch as the sun rose over the rooftops. There were times she caught him looking at her, not with longing, not with regret, but with something softer and deeper. Something like gratitude. One Saturday afternoon, the boys insisted on going to the lake. The water was still cold, but the air had warmed just enough for the wind to feel less cutting on their cheeks. They brought sandwiches, fruit, and the boys' favorite chocolate chip cookies. The lake sparkled under a pale blue sky, and the boys raced to the shore, throwing small stones into the water to watch the ripples expand in rings. Eleanor spread a blanket over the grass and sat down. Andrew settled beside her, closer than he usually sat, but still leaving a space she could close or widen when she needed to. They watched the boys in a comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need to be filled. After a while, Eleanor spoke, her voice low and thoughtful. "When I left, I thought I had lost everything. Not just you. My home, my stability, my future. I didn't know who I was without us." Andrew didn't interrupt. He waited. "But then the boys came," she continued. "And I realized I had never understood strength until I had to hold 3 lives in my arms all by myself. I learned how to survive, but I also learned how to live, and I don't regret that." He nodded slowly, his jaw working, a silent ache in his eyes. "I don't regret any part of you," he said. "And I regret every part of how I treated you." Eleanor turned her face to him. The wind brushed her hair onto her cheek, and he raised a hand, slowly and carefully, to tuck the strand behind her ear. She let him. "I didn't know how to love you then," he said. "Not the way you deserved. I loved you the way I understood love, with fear, with pride, with walls." "And now?" she asked, her voice not challenging, only curious. "Now I love you without expectations," he said, "without asking anything in return. Loving you is the easiest thing I do. But I won't ask you to forgive me before you're ready. I won't rush you." The breeze moved through the grass. The boys cheered triumphantly at a particularly large splash. The world felt open. Eleanor let the silence linger for a moment. Then she reached out for his hand, not with hesitation this time. Not with caution. She took it fully, her fingers intertwining with his. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," she said, and the truth resonated deeply between them. "And I'm not afraid to love you again. I'm only afraid of losing what we've built." His fingers squeezed hers, firm, supportive. "We don't go backward," he said softly. "We build forward." They sat together like that for a long time while the boys played, holding hands. Not as 2 people trying to reclaim a past, but as 2 people choosing a future. One slow, one gentle, one real. As they packed up to leave, Liam ran up to them first. "Daddy, look! I found a heart-shaped rock." Andrew knelt, taking the small stone with a smile that softened every sharp line of his face. "That is special," he said. "Let's keep it." Eleanor watched them, her heart full, grounded, and steady. The family had returned, not by force, not by forgiveness alone, but by growth, patience, and the willingness to choose each other again, day after day. Final reflection and call to action. Closing. The story of Eleanor and Andrew is a testament to the transformative power of parenthood and redemption. Andrew learned that the greatest currency is not success, but trust that can only be earned with consistency and humility. Eleanor, on the other hand, proved that true strength lies in the ability to build and heal without needing revenge. What did Andrew's journey teach you about the meaning of love and success? Do you believe Liam's heart-shaped rock was a symbol of fate, or the result of hard-won effort? If this story of second chances and growth inspired you, please give this video a huge like. Share it with someone who needs to believe in the capacity for change, and subscribe for more real-life stories where love finds a way forward. Thank you for joining us until the end.